I didn't lose my life in an accident. I destroyed it with one decision I thought no one would ever notice. When people look at old photos of me, they usually say the same thing. You had everything: a steady smile, a confident posture, a woman standing beside me who looked at me like I was her whole world, two children clinging to my legs, laughing, a house that wasn't big but warm, a life that seemed complete. They're not wrong. Back then, I really did have everything. Why mornings used to begin before sunrise. I'd stand by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the street slowly wake up. My wife, Emily, would move quietly behind me, packing lunches, humming softly. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder for just a second, not saying anything. Those seconds felt safe, solid, like proof that no matter how hard the day became, I belonged somewhere. Work, people respected me. I wasn't the loudest in the room, but I was reliable. The kind of man managers trusted and coworkers leaned on. Promotions came slowly, but steadily. I wore that respect like armor, believing it defined who I was. At home, I tried to be present. I helped with homework. I attended school events. I listened, at least I thought I did. Emily would talk about her day, the kids, small worries that felt insignificant compared to deadlines and bills. I nodded. I reassured. I assumed love was something that stayed as long as you didn't abandon it completely. But love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades quietly, like sound in another room. The first crack wasn't anger or betrayal. It was silence. Emily stopped humming. Conversations became practical. We talked about groceries, schedules, responsibilities. When I kissed her goodnight, it felt polite, familiar, safe but distant. I told myself this was normal. Marriage wasn't supposed to feel exciting forever, right? Stability was the goal. Comfort, routine. Still, there were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling an ache I couldn't name. I was surrounded by people, yet something inside me felt unseen, unneeded. I never said this out loud. Men like me weren't supposed to feel that way. I had a family to provide for. That should have been enough. Then work began to change. The company expanded. New faces filled the office. Fresh energy. New conversations. One of those conversations belonged to someone who listened in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Not interrupting. Not rushing to fix things. Just listening. It started harmlessly. Coffee breaks. Casual jokes. Share complaints about long hours. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing I couldn't explain if asked. I told myself that connection didn't mean anything. People are allowed to talk, allowed to feel understood. But there's a dangerous comfort in being heard that I began staying late at the office more often. Not because work demanded it, but because it was quieter there. Simpler. No expectations beyond performance. No emotional history to manage. At home, Emily noticed the changes before I did. She asked gently at first, "You're working a lot lately." I smiled and said things were busy. She accepted it because that's who she was. Trusting, patient. Guilt crept in quietly. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I knew I was drifting. I started guarding my phone without realizing it, turning the screen away, taking calls in another room. Small habits that felt insignificant in the moment, but would later replay in my mind like warnings I chose to ignore. There were nights Emily waited up for me. I could see it in her eyes, the concern masked as understanding. She never accused, never demanded. That somehow made it worse. I promised myself I would fix things. Plan a trip, spend more time, be more present. But intentions are easy. Action is harder. That I told myself I was tired, that this phase would pass, that I deserved a little space after years of responsibility. I convinced myself that loneliness wasn't betrayal, that feeling something didn't mean I was doing something. Yet every time I laughed at a message on my phone, a part of me stiffened. Every time Emily asked about my day, I edited the truth. Not lies exactly, just omissions. And omissions, I would later learn, are where destruction begins. Point one evening, I came home to find Emily sitting at the dining table, untouched dinner in front of her. The kids were already asleep. She looked up at me and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes," she said too quickly. "Just tired." We sat in silence. the space between us heavier than words. I wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but something stopped me. Fear, maybe, or shame. I told myself I'd do it tomorrow. Tomorrow became another late night. I didn't realize then that this was the calm before everything broke. That the life I thought was secure was already shifting beneath my feet. That every unspoken feeling, every hidden moment, was quietly stacking consequences I couldn't yet see, that I believed I was still in control, that I was wrong. I didn't know it then, but the moment doubt entered my home, peace quietly walked out. After that silent dinner, something changed between Emily and me. Not dramatically. There were no arguments, no slammed doors, no accusations. It was subtler than that, and somehow more painful. She started watching me instead of waiting for me, listening not just to my words, but to the spaces between them. At first, I convinced myself I was imagining it. People notice patterns only when they're looking for them, I told myself. And why would she be looking? I hadn't done anything wrong. At least, nothing that couldn't be explained away as exhaustion or pressure. Work was demanding. Life was busy. That was the story I kept repeating, both to her and to myself. Yet the house felt different. Quieter, but not peaceful. Conversations ended faster. Laughter didn't linger. Emily still did everything she always had, cooked, cared, showed up for the kids. But something in her eyes had shifted. The warmth was there, but guarded, like a door left unlocked but no longer wide open. One morning, as I reached for my phone on the kitchen counter, I noticed her glance at it, and then quickly look away. It was such a small thing, but my chest tightened. That's when I realized suspicion doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in softly, pretending to be curiosity, that I became more careful without admitting why. I silenced notifications. I deleted messages that didn't need to be deleted. I told myself this wasn't secrecy, just privacy. Everyone deserved that, didn't they? But the more I tried to control appearances, the more unnatural everything became. Emily started asking questions that sounded casual but felt heavy. How was your meeting? Who were you with so late? Do you like working there more than being here? Each question landed gently, but they stayed with me long after she asked them. I answered calmly, smiled, sometimes even joked, and she smiled back. But there was a pause after my answers, like she was deciding whether to believe me or not. That I noticed the changes in her routines too. She stopped leaving her phone face down like she used to. She started waking up earlier, sitting quietly with her coffee instead of humming through the house. At night, she'd turn away from me in bed, not out of anger, but distance. The kind that grows when trust begins to wobble, but hasn't yet fallen to work. Things felt easier, lighter. Conversations flowed naturally. I felt seen again, appreciated in a way that filled the emptiness I had been carrying for months. That feeling scared me, even as I welcomed it. I told myself I deserved happiness. That connection didn't have to mean destruction. But deep down, I knew I was standing at the edge of something dangerous. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. I found Emily in the living room, folding laundry. She looked surprised to see me. "You're home early," she said. "Just thought I'd beat traffic," I replied. She nodded, then asked, "Do you still love me?" The question caught me off guard. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was quiet, almost fragile. "Of course I do," I said immediately. And in that moment, I believed it. She studied my face for a long second, as if searching for something familiar that had gone missing. Then she smiled, a soft, sad smile, and returned to folding clothes. That smile followed me all night. It sat heavy on my chest when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling once again. Guilt has a strange way of disguising itself. It doesn't always shout that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it whispers that you're already too far in to turn back. I started noticing signs that Emily was piecing things together. She checked the time more often when I wasn't home. She asked the kids casual questions about my schedule. Once, I saw her scrolling through our old photos, her expression unreadable. It was as if she was trying to remind herself of who we used to be. I wanted to stop everything, to sit her down and talk honestly, not about actions, but about feelings, about loneliness, about distance, about how we had somehow drifted without meaning to. But every time I imagined the conversation, fear took over. Fear of hurting her. Fear of changing everything. Fear of seeing disappointment in her eyes that I chose silence. And silence, I would later understand, is not neutral. It takes sides, and it never sides with love. The tension in our home grew thicker by the day. Even the kids sensed it. They became quieter, more careful, as if our emotions were glass that might shatter if touched. Emily tried harder, planning dinners, suggesting family outings, reaching for my hand when we walked together. Each effort felt like a question she was too afraid to ask, that I responded, but half-heartedly. My body was present, but my mind wandered, and every time it did, the distance between us widened just a little more. By the end of that week, I knew something was coming. You can feel it when life is about to demand a price. There's a heaviness in the air, a tightening in your chest, like the moment before a storm breaks, that I just didn't know how high the cost would be. And I still believed, foolishly, that I could control the outcome. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, sharp enough to cut deeper each time. The day everything began to surface didn't feel dramatic. There was no thunder, no raised voices, no warning signs screaming for attention. It started like any other morning, with sunlight slipping through the curtains and the quiet routine of a family pretending everything was fine. Emily was already awake when I got out of bed. She sat at the edge, phone in her hand, staring at the screen as if it might speak first. When she looked up at me, her eyes were calm, but there was a resolve in them I hadn't seen before. "Can we talk tonight?" she asked. Her tone was steady, controlled. That frightened me more than anger ever could. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Is something wrong?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Just tonight." All day, a weight pressed against my chest. At work, conversations felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I checked my phone constantly, half expecting a message, half dreading it. For the first time, the comfort I'd been clinging to felt like a trap. When I got home that evening, the kids were already in their rooms. The house was too quiet. Emily sat at the dining table again, the same place where weeks earlier she had waited with untouched dinner. This time, there was no food, just 2 glasses of water and a folded piece of paper. "Sit," she said softly that I did. She didn't accuse me. She didn't cry. She slid the paper across the table. "I found this in your jacket pocket," she said that IT was a receipt. A small, ordinary thing. A coffee shop I'd never mentioned. A time I couldn't explain away. My mouth went dry. "You don't have to explain it yet," she continued. "I just want to know something first." She took a deep breath. "Are you still being honest with me?" The room felt smaller, the walls closer. Every instinct told me to deny, to minimize, to protect myself. And that's what I tried to do. "It's just coffee," I said. "You know how work is." She nodded slowly, as if she had expected that answer. Then she reached in her phone and turned the screen toward me. A photo stared back at me, taken from a distance, blurry but unmistakable. Me, sitting across from someone else, leaning forward, smiling in a way I hadn't smiled at home in a long time. "I didn't plan to look," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. "I didn't want to be this person, but something felt wrong, and I couldn't ignore it anymore." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The truth, which I had kept carefully contained in fragments, was suddenly demanding to be whole. "How long?" she asked. The question echoed in my head. How long had I been lying? To her? To myself? "I don't know," I finally whispered. And that was the first honest thing I'd said in weeks. She laughed softly, a sound full of pain. "You don't know," she repeated. "But I felt it. Every late night. Every distracted answer. Every time you were here, but not really with us." Tears slipped down her face then, silent and steady. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away, not in anger, but exhaustion. "I trusted you," she said. "Not because you were perfect, but because I believed you would protect this family, even when things got hard." The truth spilled out after that. Not all at once, not cleanly. Just enough for the illusion to collapse. Enough for the story I had been telling myself to fall apart. She didn't ask for every detail. She didn't need them. The reality was already heavier than any explanation I could offer. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She wiped her tears and straightened her back. Now, we stopped pretending. The next few days were a blur. Conversations that should have happened years ago came rushing out in hours. Anger surfaced. Grief followed. Sometimes they existed in the same sentence. She asked questions I couldn't answer. I apologized more times than I could count, each one sounding smaller than the last. The kids sensed the shift immediately. Emily tried to shield them, but children feel truth even when it's unspoken. They watched us carefully, unsure of where they stood in a world that suddenly felt unstable. IT work. I wasn't as careful as I thought I'd been. Whispers began. A look here, a pause there. When trust breaks in one place, it weakens everywhere. Point one night. Emily sat across from me again, her face tired but clear. I need space, she said. Not because I don't care, but because I don't know who you are right now, and I can't pretend anymore. Those words hurt more than any accusation could have, because she wasn't punishing me. She was protecting herself. She packed a small bag to stay with her sister. I stood in the doorway, watching the life I had built begin to step away from me. I wanted to stop her, to promise change, to swear that things would be different. But promises made after the truth are heavy with doubt. When the door closed behind her, the house felt hollow. For the first time, there was no illusion left to hide behind. Just the echo of my choices and the realization that control had been an illusion all along. I sat alone in the silence, finally understanding that discovery wasn't the end of the story, that IT was the beginning of the consequences. The moment she walked out, I realized freedom isn't silence. It's facing the noise you try to escape. The house didn't just feel empty after Emily left. It felt unfamiliar. Every sound echoed too loudly. Every corner reminded me of something I'd taken for granted. The ticking of the clock in the hallway became unbearable, as if it was counting down not time, but regret. The first night alone, I slept on the couch. Not because the bed was uncomfortable, but because it felt wrong to lie where she should have been. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment I wished I could undo. I told myself I deserved this loneliness, that it was only temporary, that things would somehow settle if I just gave it time. Time, however, has a cruel way of forcing clarity. The next morning, I woke up to messages from work. Short, formal, concerned. News travels fast when dignity cracks. A meeting was scheduled. No explanation given. Just a request that felt more like a warning. That I walked into the office feeling exposed, as if everyone could see the mess I had been hiding behind polite smiles. Conversations stopped when I passed. Eyes avoided mine. Respect, once quietly earned, now felt conditional. Fragile. The meeting was brief and clinical. Concerns about professionalism. Boundaries. Image. I listened, nodding, unable to argue. When trust is broken in one place, it stains everything it touches. I was asked to take time off. Indefinite. A word that sounded gentle but carried weight. Driving home, I realized how quickly life can unravel. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in a series of quiet losses. A seat at the table. A sense of belonging. A future that once felt predictable. Emily didn't call. I didn't expect her to. Instead, I received a message about the kids, simple logistics. School schedules. Pickup times. Her tone was polite, distant, like speaking to someone you used to know. Seeing my children became both comfort and punishment. They hugged me tightly, unaware of the full story, sensing only that something had changed. I try to be strong for them, to act normal, but children have a way of seeing through performance. They asked when Mom was coming home. I didn't have an answer. Nights were the worst. Silence has a way of asking questions you can't avoid. Without distraction, I was forced to sit with the truth. Not just what I had done, but why. I had chased a feeling instead of fixing a foundation. I had chosen escape over effort. The connection I once thought was comforting now felt empty. Conversations lacked meaning. What had felt like understanding revealed itself as temporary distraction, when reality demanded responsibility. That presence faded quietly, leaving nothing but embarrassment and self-disgust. I realized then that consequences aren't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they arrive as absence, as the slow removal of everything that once grounded you. Weeks passed. Emily and I spoke occasionally, always about the kids, never about us. Each conversation reminded me how far away she was, not in distance, but in trust. I wanted to apologize again, to explain, to promise change. But I knew words were cheap now. What I had broken couldn't be repaired with sentences. One afternoon, I found an old notebook while cleaning the house. Inside were plans we had once made together, vacations we never took, goals we postponed, dreams we assumed would wait for us. Reading those pages felt like grieving a life that could have been dedicated to work the absence stretched on. Savings began to thin. Stress replaced routine. I was forced to confront the reality that my choices had consequences beyond emotion. Stability, once taken for granted, was now uncertain. Friends stopped calling. Not all at once. One by one. Some didn't know what to say. Others chose distance. I couldn't blame them. Betrayal makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to examine their own lives, and not everyone wants that mirror. I started therapy, not out of hope, but necessity. Sitting in that room, forced to speak honestly, stripped away the excuses I had been clinging to. Loneliness wasn't an excuse. Feeling unseen wasn't a justification. There were problems to be faced, not escapes to be chased. Slowly, painfully, I began to understand that love isn't just about how someone makes you feel. It's about how you choose to act when feelings change. Commitment isn't sustained by passion alone, but by responsibility, honesty, and effort. One evening, after dropping the kids back at Emily's sister's place, I sat in my car longer than usual, watching the lights in the windows, hearing laughter that no longer included me. I didn't feel anger or self-pity then, just a deep, aching awareness of what I had lost. I had wanted to feel alive again. Instead, I had dismantled the life that made me whole. I drove away. It finally became clear that consequences aren't punishments imposed from the outside. They're the natural result of the choices we make when we think no one is watching. And the hardest consequence of all was knowing that even if forgiveness ever came, nothing would ever be the same again. I thought losing everything would break me. What I didn't expect was how clearly it would finally teach me who I had been. Months passed before I truly accepted that my life had changed forever. Not in the dramatic way stories usually end, but in small, irreversible ways. Emily never moved back home. The house was eventually sold. Every room emptied of the memories we once believed would last a lifetime. Each box felt like a chapter closing without permission to reopen it. The divorce was quiet. No shouting in courtrooms. No dramatic scenes. Just signatures, legal language, and the dull ache of finality. Emily spoke little during the process. When she did, her voice was calm, controlled. That calm hurt more than anger ever could. It told me she had already done the work of letting go. The kids adjusted in ways that both amazed and devastated me. Children are resilient, people say. And they are, but resilience doesn't mean unscarred. They asked fewer questions over time. They stopped waiting for things to go back to how they were. That was when I understood the depth of what I had taken from them. Not just stability, but innocence. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Bordeaux, cheap furniture, silence. For the first time in my adult life, no one depended on me after sunset. No one asked where I was going or when I'd be back. The freedom I once thought I wanted felt empty now. Heavy, directionless. Work eventually called, not with restoration, but with closure. My position was no longer available. They wished me well. I thanked them and hung up the phone, staring at it long after the call ended. My career hadn't ended because of incompetence, but because trust had been damaged. And trust, once broken, is rarely repaired fully. There were days I replayed every choice obsessively. Every moment where I could have turned back. Every warning I ignored. I wanted to blame something, stress, routine, distance. But the truth was simpler and harder to accept. I had chosen myself over the people who trusted me most. Therapy continued. Slowly, it stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like responsibility. I learned to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. To recognize that boredom isn't the enemy, And that commitment doesn't mean constant excitement. It means showing up even when it's quiet. Especially when it's quiet point one afternoon, Emily agreed to meet me for coffee. Not to reconcile, just to talk. She looked different, lighter, steadier. There was a strength in her I hadn't seen before. I hope you're doing better, she said honestly. I'm trying, I replied. And for once, it wasn't a defense. It was truth that we spoke about the kids, about schedules, about practical things. Near the end, I finally said what I should have said long ago. I'm sorry for the way I broke our family, I said. Not just for what I did, but for how long I refused to see it. She nodded, not coldly, not warmly, just honestly. I forgive you, she said. But forgiveness doesn't mean rebuilding. I understood that then. Forgiveness isn't a reward. It's a boundary that allows healing without erasing consequences. That night, I walked home instead of driving. The city lights blurred through my tears, but for the first time, the tears weren't just regret. They were understanding. I couldn't undo the damage, but I could choose who I became afterward. Life didn't magically improve. There was no sudden redemption, just slow, intentional change. I showed up for my kids consistently. I rebuilt my reputation piece by piece. I learned to be alone without being empty. And most importantly, I learned this. Affairs don't begin with passion. They begin with unspoken truths, with silence, with choosing avoidance over honesty. That I lost my marriage because I didn't fight for it when fighting meant effort instead of escape. I lost my career because I underestimated how far consequences travel. I lost my sense of self because I betrayed my own values before betraying anyone else. That if you're listening to this story and thinking your secret is harmless, that you're still in control, that no one will get hurt, understand this. You don't lose everything the moment you cross a line. You lose it gradually, quietly, until one day you look around and realize there's nothing left to protect. Love isn't protected by promises alone. It's protected by choices, daily, ordinary, difficult choices that I learned that too late. But if my loss can stop someone else from making the same one, then at least this story has a purpose beyond regret.